Scholar at Bennett College for Women in Greensboro, North Carolina. She's originally from Zimbabwe, and she's receiving a BA in biology, and she was an intern here at YIISA. And we just recently found out that Tatenda was accepted to Columbia University on full scholarship, and now she was just accepted to Cambridge University on full scholarship. But she's waiting to hear from the best university.
Yale.
Oxford. We have another Oxford. So, and Tatenda was here for 6 months. She helped us a lot. She was an intern, and she was working on issues of anti-Semitism and racism, the intersection of it. And it was really a privilege that she was here with us. And it's amazing how, you know, if people are open-minded, she sort of came in to a center on anti-Semitism, and she, within, I think, 24 hours, fit right in. It was really a pleasure to have her. And when people are open-minded and open to new situations, you know, you can really benefit. And I think Tatenda benefited, we benefited from having her. And, you know, there's actually a Jewish ethical, I guess, teaching that says that if we're all created in the image of God, right, we all have a truth, and the only way to wisdom is to be open to other people's truths. So when we're racist or sexist or anti-Semitic, as we'll hear now, we cheat ourselves, because if I'm sexist, then I have 3 billion or 4 billion. I miss out on 3 billion opportunities to gain wisdom. If I'm racist against people, let's say African descent or Asian descent, I've also lost 2 billion possibilities to become white. So we cheat ourselves. And so it was really wonderful having you here, and you brought us wisdom, and I'm happy that you're embarking on greater successes. I'm sure Tatenda is going to emerge as a leader in the near future. She already is. So welcome.
All right, thank you.
And I'm going to be a bit rude, but I have to cut out early, so I'm not walking out on what Tatenda's going to tell us.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you don't mind. I'm probably going to sit down, and I think everybody can see from here. And I don't know, should I sit down, stand up? What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? I guess I'll be sitting down and standing down. But I'm so happy to be here. I'm glad everything that Charles was saying. It was an awesome experience to come here, and truly I learned so much being at the center for the 6 months I was here. Coming into the center, of course, Tatenda Mujeni, coming from Bennett College for Women, coming to YIISA, which is something, anti-Semitism was, the first time they're like, you're going to this Center for Interdisciplinary Study of Anti-Semitism. And it's like, yay, but I really need to figure out what all this means, like the history that's within it. It was so intense for me before I came, but I fell in love with the center and everybody here, and I'm glad to be back. So the title of my topic, as you can see, is Concerns About Mothers, How Divisions in the Baby Boomer Generation Affect the Contemporary Feminist Movement, the Role of Racism and Anti-Semitism. It'll be a short topic, and I hope you guys will enjoy it, and it'll be great to hear what you guys think about it. Why feminism? So that's the big question. Why am I focusing on feminism or relating anti-Semitism and racism to feminism? As I said, I come from Bennett College for Women. So Bennett College for Women, for those who might not know, is one of 2 historically black colleges for women in the United States. There's Spelman College and Bennett College for Women. So even though we might not identify as being feminists, it's like a college that empowers black women, empowers women of color. So this is something that was always within me. So when I came here, it was get a topic that I may relate to and related to anti-Semitism also. So feminism was the one thing that automatically that I identified with. Even though when I first came, I didn't totally call myself a feminist, but I identified with the feminism of women of color from my school, from around the world. I'm also from Zimbabwe. So that's another thing, that women getting, empowering women in my country of Zimbabwe. So that's why I was first drawn to feminism. Oops. Oh no. Okay. So the topic was the contemporary, like how the baby boomers generation affected the contemporary feminist movement. So before I even get into it, I just want to give you like a brief history for you. Most of you do know the history of feminism, but a brief history of feminism and where it began and where we are now, or what we call the contemporary feminist movement. So this is, I'm mostly focusing on the feminist movement in the United States. And I'll try and touch on a global feminist movement, but then focusing basically here. So the first wave was the suffrage movement, which is the 1860s to 1920, which is the women in the United States, they desired to gain the right to vote. That was what it was. Women wanted to vote, and they were not being able to vote. And then in the 1920s, they finally got the right to vote. The second wave was the women's liberation movement, which is the movement that I'm basically going to be talking about, which is the movement of the baby boomers. So the movement of, I'll call my mom's movement, that's why I say it concerns of our mothers, because this is the movement that my mother, even though she's in Zimbabwe, this is the movement of the people, my mother's age group. And my mentors, a lot of my mentors who are feminists, that's their age group, mothers and grandmothers, so that's why I'm concentrating here. And their focus was equality in pay, equality in education, job opportunities, reproductive rights, rights to abortion. You know everything that happened in that feminist movement. So, so that was the second wave of feminists, and then and we move on to the third wave. I don't know if we should call it. That's why I should have put a question mark there. Should we call it third wave or contemporary feminist movement? I'm calling it contemporary because there's so much things about third wave, and there's third wave that actually exists, and people concerned with the wage system and exclusion of other women, like the slave trade, the women and the enslaved women. So I'll just say the contemporary feminist movement. And what is the third wave? What is third wave feminism? Third wave feminism is the feminist movement that involves my age group. So the millennials. So maybe after, let's say from Generation X to the millennials, we're the feminist movement that is almost, does a third wave movement really exist? I think it's almost non-existent. And those are the sentiments you'll hear from a lot of baby boomers, those prominent feminists from that age, that is there a third wave feminist movement? Do these people really exist? Are they really doing anything? So that's my age group. Do young women identify with the label feminists? So the young women in the room, do you consider yourselves feminists? No. And if you don't, well, like Lauren, do you consider yourself a feminist?
Sure. I mean, I don't actively like protest anything but yeah, I mean, I would stand up for women's rights. I've never been involved in an actual movement, though.
Mm-hmm. I would be reluctant to call myself a feminist, but this is because of very negative connotations this term has in Poland, especially. We are a young democracy, we are just learning, and the feminism was never an issue in Poland. Just for the last 10, 15 years it started to be one. And the feminists, which we have now in Poland, are extreme. And they're going too far in their claims, demands, and maybe not even claims, but because they're fighting for good reason. But they are radical. They call for the actually exclusion of men from the political scene. And, yeah. So I cannot, when someone says in Poland, I'm a feminist, that you have this whole negative picture of this person. So this would be my reason for not associating myself with the name, but with the ideas, that's for sure.
Also, I would add that in Poland, feminism is associated with
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Sorry, I would say that in Poland, feminism is associated with lack of femininity.
Yeah.
It's more cultural, it's not as political and legal, it doesn't have the associations with the fight for the rights. So even if we say, of course, we are for the equality of women and men, the term feminism would not be appropriate because of our culture.
So you wouldn't
I would never
identify
say
as-
I'm a feminist, no.
And the guys,
Although she is one.
She-
Yeah.
and the guys in the room, do you identify as feminist?
I think so. My mother was very active. In 1975 was the UN Year of the Woman, and she was one of the organizers in Montreal, so she educated me, I think.
I mean, as long as the just demands of the second wave, like equal pay, equal education and whatever, are not being met, of course I consider myself a feminist.
Oh.
So, I mean,
So, but then that's, it was interesting, as I said, thank you everyone for your comments, coming from my school. And we had a conference. This was like before I asked my friends around the place, and most of my friends were like, I don't identify with feminists, it's just really crazy. These women, they're like hate men and we love men and all this stuff. And some were like, I'd rather be like, you know, the womanist that was introduced. I'd rather consider myself a womanist and include all aspects of the black female, including her family and everything. But hardly do you hear people saying that they're feminists. There are very few students would actually say they're feminists. But a week ago, we had a conference and we're talking about just something really, but we're talking about women being sold, like in modern day slavery, basically. And they were saying, then we have like a program at school where everybody sits, every single, like the whole school is basically, the school is really small. So it's like between 600 and 700 students. So there were like 300 students. They asked the question, how many of you consider yourselves feminists? This is an all women's college. And I was the only person who stood up. And then they asked us again, how many of you consider yourselves feminists? So my friends were kind of supportive of me, stood up, and like 2 other people in the room. And they said, for those people who consider themselves feminists, can you tell us why you're feminist? And everybody sat down. So it's like, there's this reluctance, that's what I'm talking about, this reluctance of being called a feminist. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being a feminist, but there's this reluctance from the younger generation of being called a feminist. Even though a whole lot, like Alex would say, that a lot of things, or Lawrence said, a lot of things that we do, we are acting as feminists. We're pro-women's rights. We're concerned with what's happening with women all over the world, and we'll do anything to help. But very few of us are reluctant of this label of feminist. And that's what a lot of the older feminists that I talk to, like my mentors who are feminists, will be talking to me about how why is the feminist movement dead? We're non-existent. They were not doing anything that was supposed to be done. And so now, in this research I was doing, I was like trying to figure out, why are we as young feminists or young girls or young women reluctant to identify with feminism? And these are some reasons why being a feminist is unpopular today. I know these ladies will say some of it, but then a desire to avoid identification with radical feminists, like, yeah, all men should, I'm just joking, they don't say that, but like, just like real radical stuff, like women should be in charge of everything, and men, let's hate, like not hate men, but then it's like, that's what the younger feminists would get. And rejection of a separatist-oriented political strategy, like women on one side and males on the other side, and everything you say, no, you're being sexist, you're being sexist, you're being sexist. And sometimes you're just like, we don't want to identify with that, because we do love our men, we do like our young men and everything, but then that's not the reason. And of course the label of a feminist, I wish I had a picture in here, that people think of, the first thing they think of feminists. Feminists are shrill, overly aggressive, man-hating, ball-busting, selfish, extremist, deliberately unattractive women with absolutely no sense of humor, like mad all the time. And you never see it. Yeah. And when you see it, when you think of feminists, you're not thinking about young, beautiful, doing everything is just mad. Like, why? Why is this? Is this the image that we as the young feminists got from the feminists? And I really respect, like before I knew a bit about the feminist movement, but then after research, I really respect what these women did. They stepped out, joining together, like from different groups, and saying, okay, this is it. They have been saying things about this, we're going to do something about it now. But then it's now, what we got from it, the legacy is like of disruption, of people separating in the movement, and it's just like a hate of the feminist movement. And that's why I was looking at it. So I was looking at the separations and why we don't want to identify as, or maybe one of the problems that could be there is to be separations in the second wave or the second wave movement. So I'll say that I was looking at the liberation movement, which is the second wave. And a little history, I already said about it, is like women, the first formation of the National Organization of Women. And this organization initially was not separated. It was like all the women came in. If you see the first founders of the organization, there was a man there was Jewish women, there's African American women, there was Chicano women. It was like women joined together, and then they had a common, these are the closest of all friends, and they joined together with a common goal of equality for women. We're working for the liberation of women. But then a few years within, this is like the 1960s, by the 1970s, there was so much separation and division in the movement that in the end, it's kind of frizzled off in the 1970s. Even though it does exist, feminist movements now is still there, but then there was like so much tension that exists. And the first tension was, of course, the women of color separating themselves, saying that the white middle class movement, white middle class Christian movement, they only were concerned with issues that affected women, white women. It was like what they had was white privilege, even though they were saying they were discriminated against because they're women. But the women of color, the Chicano women, are saying, but you don't have double oppression. You're not Mexican, you're not Latino and a woman. You're not black and a woman. You're not Jewish and a woman. You're just a white woman, and you're the one. These are the women who they say they are in charge. And this is, of course, the white women in the country are more than the minority groups, and they were the ones more in these organizations. So the women, first of all, there was the formation of the Third World Women's Alliance, and I was reading a book, This Bridge Called My Back. This is poems and anthologies from women of color. And it was just really crazy how much these women really felt there was this movement separated themselves, this movement that was supposed to be for all women, and they're like, no, it's like a white women's movement. So that was the formation of coalitions. Okay, fine, this is what, maybe you needed coalitions, and there was a separation. And some separations and coalitions were formed with black Jewish coalitions. And these were pretty strong. You might not know that Jewish women were involved in the civil rights movement. A lot of Jewish women were prominent in the civil rights movement. And when they left, they were, of course, were always supportive. There was this history of shared oppression between women of color, specifically black women and Jewish women. So there was that understanding that was there. But later on, this identity politics raised by the Combahee River collectives with Barbara Smith and all, where the women it's identifying by yourself. You're focusing on your own oppression. This led to divisions and separations between the black women and the Jewish women in the movement. And these were like the harshest. I haven't seen so much writing and so much backlash from black and Jewish women about why there were so many separations. And some of the reasons will be, of course, the black women are saying, well, the Jewish women are still white. They still have the white privilege, the white middle class women did have in the movement. And that was always, even till today, I'm not going to say this ended up in the women movement, because I still have black feminists I call my mentors. And when you talk about issues of anti-Semitism, it's like non-existent. It's like why are you focusing on things that don't affect you? This is not you. You're a black woman and everything. There was like a separation of, I'll focus on my own identity and they can focus on their own identity. And of course the Jewish women who have been in support of the black women through the civil rights movement and everything are now saying, why are you pretending like the Jewish women became, like, they're saying they were invisible. They had double oppression too. They were Jewish and they were women, but their oppression was invisible. And the black women failed to acknowledge their oppression. You have people talking about the black women hunkering down on their own oppression and not realizing the oppression of other women. And this led to like a whole lot of backlash, which, as I say, is still existent today. And I think that's one of the reasons that that has been a legacy that has been passed on to our generation of feminists. I'm not going to say that there's a specific hatred between the Jewish feminists of my generation and the black feminists of my generation, but this history of separation, this history of forming coalitions and divisions ended up with our feminist movement, of the feminist movement in the 1960s and 1970s, frizzling down before. There's still so much, as Holger said, how he identifies with the feminist movement now, or he can call himself as feminist now, because the issues that are there, were there then, are still there now. What has just been done is like legislation, and then it's all theory, like, okay, women have got the right to vote, women do vote, women have got the right to be elected and officials and everything, but how many women are actually there? What is actually being implemented of what happened? So that's what I'm saying, that I don't know if, maybe this is my theory, if this movement, if women could have looked beyond the separations that they have, or be more understanding. There's no reason why a black woman would not understand the history of a Jewish woman in the same. Maybe I might not understand. Maybe this is some things that the older feminists may be able to make me understand. Why they wouldn't understand that this is the history of the Holocaust and the history of the slave trade. It might not be the same, but it's coming from the same basis of oppression that the women or the same groups felt, but then we never failed. Women failed to be, as they say, women first before anything, and that's what I think feminism was about. First of all, be a woman before, identify with a woman before anything else, and look beyond all these differences that we may have to make our feminist movement successful. This is something that Barbara Smith said, identity politics, and of course identity politics was like focusing your own oppression. It may be helpful and beneficial if used when oppressed groups use their experience of oppression as a spur of activist political work. Harmful when its primary emphasis has been to explore and to celebrate and suppress identity within a women's movement context, rather than developing practical political solutions for confronting oppression in the society itself. So this is just talking about how identity politics, maybe it was, I don't think there is something wrong in focusing on individuals' oppressions in the feminist movement. There's no harm in focusing on the individual oppression of Jewish women and the individual oppression of black women and the individual oppression of Chicano women that existed in the feminist movement. But it's like people neglected the feminist part of it and were basically focusing on my oppression because of my skin, my oppression because of my religion, my oppression. They forgot the main goal. So that's why I'm saying that identity politics was right. It seemed really great, but then people forgot the main goal that they were focusing on in the feminist movement. And now, how does this affect our feminist movement today, and how relevant is the feminist movement today? Now, as I said before, the feminist movement hardly is non-existent. You can hear feminists like, prominent feminists like Phyllis Chesler. I had a conversation with her where are you young feminists? Like, she wrote a whole book, where are the young feminists? What are you doing? We're not hearing about you. You're quiet. You're not as radical as before. And well, some of the reasons that I might not have said before is like, besides the whole separation that might have happened in the past, is we're trying to live up to this greatness that the former feminists have that we might never ever be able to live up to. These are the people who fought for abortion rights, the people who walked into the streets and everything, that we might even up. Maybe that might be one of the scary things that we might have to live up to, but then that's why we're not non-existent. But it's really it's still relevant in our society today. As I said, Hope was saying before, that all the feminists did fight for the rights for the women. They did all this stuff. However, it's their implementation of actually what was there. I was talking to Alex last night, and we were talking about, like, let's say for example, the Obama election and Hillary Clinton. Was Obama elected into office because he is rather elect a black man than a white woman, or just a woman into office? That might not be the reason. Maybe there might have been other reasons, but then was it like in the whole framework with the the experience that Hillary Clinton had and the background that she had, did people end up focusing on Obama because he was the male and not the female? And did female ever think of what the importance of having a female as a president? Women are also actually still scared of the thought of women in a position of power like that. As I said, I'm always going back to my school, where a school of all black women, where they call us voting school. We call Bennett bells. We're the bells of the South. And basically, the whole school goes to vote. When voting comes, council election, we call Bennett bells or voting bells. People always come to our school and campaign because they know the whole school. Okay, well, we'll say 94% because they're international students. Everybody else, the school shuts down for voting polls. And I think out of that 96% that might have voted, 94% voted for Obama. So was it the reason because he's a black male? And why not Hillary Clinton? Or were we thinking about the effects of electing a woman into power or not electing a woman into power? So that's what I'm saying, that there's so many things that keep on coming up that we might have thought that might have been finished in the second wave, but are still affecting our movement now, it might still affect us in the future. And so many things are subtle. It might not seem the same. How we can have, oh yeah, you want equality in your workplace, where you can have a boardroom of 30 people with one woman. Okay, there's a woman involved, but what is she supposed to do when she's the only one involved? And we're the people who are actually getting into these positions. We're the younger feminists who are getting into these positions. And the work is not totally finished. But I feel like it kind of fizzled down along the line, and they expected to pick it up from where it was. And I think there's almost all this history and legacy that was brought upon us that we might not be able to deal with, that we might need our mothers and the baby boomers' help to push us up a little bit. Like, give us a little nudge to get us where we need to get. But then I feel that there's still this history. There's always, like when I talk to them, like especially I would say the most people I talk to is like the black feminists, they still always, you'll never understand. You'll never understand the whole Jewish thing. Oh, look at Bella Asbeck and Shirley Chisholm election, how she left her, and she thought, they say they were supporting black women, but she did not support it. But is it possible to look back in our history of all the separation, and I don't know if it's forget about it, but then can we come together so we can give it a nudge for the future that's coming up for the women who are, for the feminists of my generation. And of course, a need for global feminist movement. I don't know if you're here when Phyllis Chesler was talking about what's happening like globally with Sharia law and women being affected. And I'm from Zimbabwe. There's so many things that are affecting women. It might not be an American thing. It might be subtle, but I feel like the feminist movement has to be stronger now. It's not only affecting American women. It's women from all over the world that they need the efforts of all feminists. However, I feel we're still divided from the issues that happened in the past. So that's why I think the feminist movement is still relevant today. And this is a quotation from one Lord that I felt is really, really important. And it says, "You do not have to be me in order for us to fight alongside each other. I do not have to be you to recognize that our wars are the same. What we must do is to commit ourselves to some future that can include each other and to work toward that future with the particular strengths of our individual identities. We are not the same. I'm a black female. I'm going to be working with a white Jewish woman. I'm going to be working with a Hispanic woman. I'm going to be working for the issues." I'm not thinking, now it's like with globalization, I'm not thinking about Tatenda as an individuality as a Zimbabwean woman and working for the rights of Zimbabwean women, but for the rights of women globally. We might not be the same, but is it possible to work towards thinking and aware of all our differences, working towards the rights of women and what we can do for the future. And I think right now it's probably looking back in my mother's generation. I don't know if they can mend things. I feel like there's still this separation, there's still all this blame of what happened. I'm not saying the feminist movement was very successful. The liberation movement was very successful, but then we just might need that joining back together, that we can give us, as I said, a little nudge in the contemporary feminist movement. And some things that I thought of working against the negative stereotypes that are associated with feminism today. And I feel like as we talked about the stereotypes that are there, getting more women, getting more young women. I would love for the women, the older women in here, being mentors to young feminists, getting rid of the stereotype that feminism is. I wanted to wear my little button that says this is what a feminist looks like, because very few girls of my age would go up and stand up and say this is what a feminist looks like without being labeled, like on my campus, without being labeled ugly or lesbian. There's nothing wrong with being lesbian, but then you're automatically being given all these stereotypes and labels that should not be there. Can I be a young woman who wants to be a feminist without all these stereotypes? So this is the way forward, working against the negative stereotypes that are associated with feminists. Concentrate on the execution of the rights of women. So the things that might have been, as I said, issues that the liberation movement might have put in legislation that have occurred, working on towards executing it. How can our generation learn or get the legacy from the older generation and work towards it today, and including men in the movement? That's why I asked the guys, are you a feminist? I read an article from the website called The Roots, and it says why I am a male feminist. It's really, really cool. If you can go and look at it, it's like it's a young African American man, and he was talking about why he is a male feminist. And if more males can understand the goal, I guess that comes with removing the stereotype, removing these separations and divisions and working together, that more males can understand what we're fighting for, then we can work towards equality for women somewhere in the future. And people like Tim Wise and everything, that's what we need more of in the future, and what we need in our feminist movement. So hopefully that the legacy of separations and quarrels and divisions in the second wave feminist movement can be resolved, or there can be some working together to improve the feminist movement today. And thank you for listening.
I wanted to comment, in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a movement, a black movement to acknowledge that they are also human, that the Black is Beautiful movement. And I think that that was an important process for African Americans. But I do think that beyond that, I think there seemed to be this need eventually, but I don't think it was until the late 70s or early 80s, I don't know if those, 70s and 80s, when there was a much stronger recognition of women. But we have yet to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. I mean, no equal pay for equal work. I mean, so we've gotten nowhere. And a lot of the leaders of the feminist movement were Jewish women. Mm-hmm. And the fact that today, there is absolutely no support for the anti-Semitism that these Jewish women and others experience, indicates that they really have whatever is left of the women's movement, again, cannot see beyond women. I mean, whether it's just, the separation of the various groups, but I think it's beyond that. It just they have been silenced, and they have been, it's like it doesn't exist. And the women's movement, again, is just a women's movement that has nothing to do with any other political or social aspects.
Go ahead.
I think once we started labeling people, women, Christian, Jewish, Black, white, you break down the issues. You're not focused on the issues anymore. We become divided by our differences rather than being enriched by them. Mm-hmm. And working on our commonalities. And I think if we can start looking at the commonalities and the needs again, labeling those and asking those to work on the issues, it might turn itself around. But division is very divisive, as you well know.
But then how is it going to affect, like, I've never thought of anti-Semitism, maybe because I said I was not involved in this movement. But the older feminists definitely are, oh yeah, the Jewish feminists did this, and then the Jewish feminists are like, well, the Black feminists did not recognize our oppression too. They always they were invisible. They were oh, no, you don't have anything wrong with that. But then as I said, it's now left to us. Like, that's not anything that I identify with. I'm not going to be anti-Semitic to a.
But who's saying that? You see, are those things being said to intentionally divide us? And who's actually saying those things?
But I think there's a bottom issue here is that we are facing a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism. And these same people who were led and came such a tremendous way because of Jewish women, nobody stands up for them. And in fact, they have become totally invisible.
That is really true. That is really, really true. I can't remember exactly, but a couple of years ago, there was a conference, and Jewish women and Israel were condemned at this conference. And I mean, and this was like, you would never have thought that anything like that would ever happen, but it really did happen.
Well, actually, even Ms. Magazine refused to print photographs of women Israeli women who are accomplished. They just refused to. They used some other excuse, but they refused to print. So there's this, so the hero, the founders who really we have built upon are being, that who they are made them who they, their whole culture made them the activists they were, and yet they've been just pushed out of the way. I mean, there are very few active Jewish feminists these days, and there's also, again, there is no support in that the feminists for the anti-Semitism. And I think that's what's so scary, is that it's a repetition of thousands of years of cycles, whereas, and the Jewish culture has always been there. I mean, that's one of the basic tenets, as I understand it, is that we help others, not just ourselves. I mean, I think when we pray for the peace for the world, not for Israel only. So that, so that basically, I guess it's just, to me, it has been very frustrating. Phyllis Chesler addressed that in her book also, that here they gave everything. A lot of them gave up their whole life or marriage and whatever because they believed so strongly in this. And yet, it's come to, they don't exist as their own issues. It's a generalized issue of anti-Semitism. And you would expect people, intelligent people, to see that and to provide some kind of support for it.
But I don't think, as I said, I don't think it's our generation though that's doing that. It's still the generation. It's still your generation. Yes. That's still, it's 10, 20, 30 years down the line, still having all these quarrels and separations that if we could have dealt with could have been helpful. There's some comments that I've heard, for let's say, from black feminists and everything, and I'm like, whoa, like what's this about? Like I've never heard any anti-Semitic comments until I was at YIISA, when they start saying all this stuff, like, you girl, you don't know what you're talking about. Then they start, I now get emails of the Palestinians and what's happening and these Jewish women. So I feel there's still this negativity that's still there, and there's all this hate. It might not be hatred, but then it's like, well, I'm not going to work with you until you figure yourself out, and I'm not going to work with you until you figure yourself out. And there's still, no one's really figured themselves out. And even though they say they are together, there's still so much separation that we don't need if we're going to work together to work towards just generally the general well-being of women. And that's like, it's like being passed on to us. Where I can see color, but I really don't see, if I see a young Jewish feminist and say, well, you don't go through the same things that I go through and whatever, that's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of myself as more global, a global citizen, but that's what we have to deal with. Like, this is something that the baby boomers might need to deal with before we can have a prominent feminist movement now, I think.
I have a little comment to make about feminism. I was wondering, I don't know much about it, but I was wondering, my impression was if feminism as a word, as a category, is so brings such negative associations, in some ways, why keep it? Why insist on using it to mobilize these forces? Why don't we just? I do realize sometimes we need some abstract concepts, such as civil rights movement, to mobilize people under them. But here, it seems to me that the concepts are not a problem. Was the problem are specific, practical, specific policies in specific situations. It's not about. I think everyone agrees. Yes, equality between men and women, that's not an issue, but we need, how do we implement it? So then, if that's the case, why don't we just create groups to resolve these issues and not use the word feminism?
You know, I think that's a
interesting.
great subject to talk about. Historically, from the 60s to now, originally it was the women's liberation movement, and women were called women's liberals, which was derogatory. So I think that was when feminism began to be used again. And I think that that word got derogated by people like Rush Limbaugh, for example, with the feminazis. It just seems like any word is going to be made derogatory for a movement that has opponents.
It could be
So-
an equal rights movement. I mean, that's
really
bottomly what
we're
it
talking
is.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, you know, if that, maybe that terminology would be more effective.
So why hasn't it passed?
That's right,
Yeah,
that's right. I
until
mean,
years
that's,
later.
you know, and the thing is that I think there seems to be, there's so many other issues that come up that people sort of put things on the side, well, we'll go back to this, but it just, you know, the momentum was there then, and it should have been really fought harder, maybe. I didn't get to be a feminist until I was 5 years into my marriage and realized what it meant and what I gave up. You know, but I mean, I had no understanding. Why would somebody want all of that? Because I'm from Hungary, and again, culturally, you know, male dominance, and that was how I lived my family life. So it was just totally an unaccepted thing. So.
I think an interesting question, and I don't have a lot to say about it, was because when you talked about it, I just started thinking about the Obama-Clinton. And I don't know, I mean, I voted for Obama. And thinking back, I can't exactly say I'm sure why, but, and I don't know how many people here, well, some of you are not citizens,
Yeah.
but how many voted here, and can you?
I voted for Obama, but not because white or black.
Yeah.
I voted because of personality.
Exactly. That's what
And,
I
you
thought.
know, and
But I wonder
Clinton
what
did
you say
not come
underneath
across
it
as
all.
anything.
I don't think I was afraid of a woman, you know. I mean,
No, it was just
But-
a specific woman who was running, was
Yeah.
not the person.
The person you wanted.
The person.
Tatenda would be a perfect next person.
Except
In
you can't
Zimbabwe
be
one
in Zimbabwe.
Do you think you'll go back?
I'm going to go back. I am going back. I want to be involved in politics in Zimbabwe.
That's
A
great.
dirty game, but yeah,
That's probably politics, isn't it?
but I do.
Are there a lot of female politicians in Zimbabwe?
They have a female vice president. They've got like a president, and I think we've got 4 vice presidents. So they put a woman in there, of course, and a few women. The only positions that women held were Ministry of Gender and Empowerment, and yeah. So it's like little. They talk like little. We put it there. The women for because the women are saying they need it. That's why we put them there,
But,
and they're there. Yeah. But definitely, there's still a need for more women, and probably maybe the reason why we have all these problems happening in Zimbabwe. No women involved.
and maybe the extreme feminists are right, maybe we need all women in
Yeah.
politics, I don't know. Sometimes thought that.
Just
If women were president, would we have all these wars?
like Alex was telling me about Poland and how the yeah.
Well, we have a new legislation, quotas, for the elections, and at first women wanted it to be 50%. In the end, there's 30%, and we are now approaching elections in October. And yeah, we can observe how they search for women, because women do not want to enter the politics. So now they are hunting to find this 30%. And you have on the election list all daughters, wives of politicians, aunts, mothers, sisters. And they did some interviews with hidden cameras with those women who are on the election list. And they're not the proper people to go into politics. They talk about little kittens and the kitchen and those stuff. So yeah, we have legislation, the law is there, but what we are going to do with that?
Is that because there aren't any women who want to be
yes,
politicians?
yes. This is not it's not yet our tradition that women go
It's
into
not-
politics.
it's not just
There
that
are
women-
some very, very prominent Polish politicians, and they are really doing a great job, but this is absolutely not enough. And I think that this artificial way of including them, this is a dilemma, yeah, but yeah, so.
Well, there's a question if the law comes before culture or culture
Right.
comes before
Yeah.
law. Because if you don't pass this law, then you could presume nothing will ever change.
Yeah, that's true.
So it is artificial, but it is artificial going in the right direction.
If we don't have any of these quotas, and theoretically, we could have as many women as we want, but we don't have very many. Even though they're, if you think of the lawyers as being a source, I think we have lots of female lawyers, 50%, yeah.
Law faculty in Poland, really, 70% women.
And you think that politicians, a certain number would come from there?
But not in Poland.
Yeah,
No, none of my friends went into politics. And another interesting thing is that from those of my colleagues who went into academia, it's like women go until they have their PhDs and that's it. And their colleagues go up to get a professor title, and this is like a rule. It's incredible when the members of the board of my institute, which is Institute of Legal Studies, includes about 70 law professors, and there are 10 women out of 70.
Unfortunately, it's more true here too.
Yeah.
Think about the women, more women PhDs in English Lit, and how many on the faculty?
Right, how many of the head of faculty?
Well,
You won't even talk about it.
What percentage are women in the faculty? I don't know, and I don't know what it is now, because they put in, I don't know whether there were laws or there were certainly policies, because maybe government money, they were able to use government money. In other words, if you accepted, grants, you had to prove that you were, trying to correct it. But I don't know how effective it was. I don't know.
In a lot of places, they were twofer. You would get a black woman, then you
Yeah,
kill both quotas.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so
that's
true.
good.
So even in this country, even though it's possible, it's, in its many years, it doesn't happen yet.
There's a long way to go still.
I was gonna say that I'm older than the boomers by a bit, and my children are younger, so they're 40, so I don't know what to call them. And my son considers himself a feminist. If you ask him, my son is, but his wife, I'm sure.
Thank you.